record and I will share my screen.
Okay.
Thanks, Dominic.
No problem. I'm working on it. Tested it before. And can you see?
You can see your email Outlook
But you don't see the screen?
slides. No.
No, we see your we see Outlook.
Okay. My apologies.
Well, while you're getting that going, Dominic, maybe I'll give a quick intro. So in addition to some of the data points that we mentioned, one of the things that was really unique in Oak Forest was that they were looking for strategies in their regulatory environment to both encourage some of their existing property owners to put money into their properties, but also their building and zoning codes and how those might be deterrents to attracting new investments. So it's very much a kind of an economic development slash housing set of policies they were looking for. That's not all they were looking for, but it was unique relative to some of the projects that they serve, or the projects that we've done. And I see our slides are up now, Dominic. Maybe move forward.
Sure.
So we've talked about this already in the main room. There's no reason to repeat all of it. The three things that they were really interested in when they discussed the data were: one, how to attract new multifamily investment that serves their senior population, so folks can in those homes can downsize and bring new homeowners into the community. Two, some of the multifamily issues that I mentioned, both attracting new multifamily to their TOD, but also really just bringing some of their existing multifamily to the quality and caliber that they just wanted to see and saw being built in some of their neighbors to the west. And then finally, we tried to help them focus on affordable housing and how that interplays with both the multifamily and aging in place concerns, particularly for the senior population, many of whom are income constrained. Next slide.
Kyle, and one thing we did not mention for Beach Park and Oak Forest was the COVID-related housing challenges that we saw. So we also looked at data from, I believe, is it DePaul. They did a study on renters versus homeowners and who's more likely to face more challenges with the COVID economic downturn. Like many other communities in our region, it was obvious that renters would face more challenges. I believe there was 42% of renters in the township that Oak Forest falls in were in occupations most likely impacted by the pandemic. So I did want to make a note of that.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. And that actually dovetails into one of the recommendations that we made. So I think the plan is to go through these recommendations quickly, but then pick the small group's brain on what they think and what we might have missed and how we might do this next time. I know I've used the word unique a few times. This engagement was unique for us because the city was so interested in investor behavior, both their existing property managers as well as attracting new developers. So we made some recommendations to them. First, we made some recommendations to them for their existing approach to property managers and rental regulation. Not every community has a rental regulation or licensing framework. Oak Forest does. It's combined with their crime-free housing program. And as part of that, they, through their police department, they train all of their property managers once a year to understand the licensing and some of the penalties that they may experience under crime-free. we encouraged them to consider some more affirmative things that they can circulate to their landlords as part of that program. And so initially, we were joined by the Preservation Compact, who recommended that they regularly send out information on energy efficiency, as well as other programs available through CIC for multifamily buildings, and made themselves available to be part of this training program once a year, and that they send out emails on it on a regular basis. As Diana mentioned, we were in the middle of COVID when all of this happened, so all of the rental assistance programs that have since been released, we recommended the city email those to their landlords as well. Those mom and pop landlords in particular can be tough to engage, and every little bit helps. The second recommendation that we thought might be of real interest to this group was on building codes. There's some general awareness within the city that their building codes may be restrictive and dissuade investors from being interested in existing properties that they have, particularly two former mobile home park properties and a property within their TOD. But they weren't really sure, they were sure in a general sense, but they weren't really sure specifically what they could do. So we invited the Village of Lombard to come and talk about how they had adjusted their building code to allow fabricated wood products as part of their type 4 construction, as well as think through other things that they had thought about, sprinklers, fire exits, etc. And basically recommended that Oak Forest go through the same process. It was a very interesting discussion, but we're, I think, very interested to hear from others in the committee how they thought through this building code issue. And then finally, we encouraged the city to consider a affordable housing building for seniors, particularly in their TOD area, which at the end of our process, the mayor, during our presentation, told the council that he was supportive of moving forward. So I think the plan is to get your thoughts on some of these. The building code issue was new for us, and I think that we're interested to hear from others who've thought through how these can be an impediment to housing investment, as well as other ways to encourage multifamily property managers to invest in their properties above and beyond code enforcement.
Hey, Kyle, this is Lisa from Landmarks, Illinois. And I'm sorry if I missed this, if you mentioned it, because I came into the room just a bit late. Are you all aware of Cook County's efforts right now to redevelop the Oak Forest campus there? That I think there was an RFP charrette process going on through February into March. Architect Jackie Koo was the person hired to oversee that. I'm just wondering if you know the status of it, because I think the hope was that that was going to maybe be multifamily on that location, and it's such a large site. I just didn't understand if any of this conversation relative to multifamily was being encouraged to maybe go to that location as well as sort of a large opportunity site.
Yeah, we facilitated some connection between Cook County and the city on that. It was a little bit unusual for this engagement because it's on unincorporated land, and so where we were, they were just beginning that process. We hoped that this would eventually inform.
Kyle, I can speak to that actually if you'd like.
Okay.
Planning director for Cook County.
Yeah, thanks, Susan.
Yeah, it's okay. How you doing, Lisa? Good to see you. Basically, yeah, we were going down a path of doing a charrette that has reached a bit of a bump. And so the initial plans that had been pitched by the consultant did include housing as a possible use on that site, given its proximity to the train station and the forest preserves. But the issue had always been, is there market for that, to basically appease the development community. That said, we are looking at a lot of other ways to help finance affordable housing other than our HUD money that we get. But we're looking in Markham, for example, we're going to be issuing a private activity bonds to assist in the construction of a senior living facility there. If that goes well, then that's a good model for us to replicate in other areas in the Southland, particularly Oak Forest, Harvey, and possibly Chicago Heights. And then also, we've been in conversations with IDA because, they provide the majority of the financing for the funding that we invest our projects in. For the projects that we invest our funding in, to see, if we can identify certain sectors. I heard what you were saying, Carl, about the renters being most impacted, or maybe it was Diana, renters being most impacted by the pandemic. Out to our team to see how many applications we received for the rental assistance program, because I do have a map here that can show where those applications are coming from. But it's by zip code, it doesn't identify municipality. So we can all kind of guess and say, oh, there's Oak Forest there. It looks like they have good coverage. It does. But I'll get you a count shortly just so you can quantify what the need is for that. I think the bigger issue is just providing more units, and making sure that those units are affordable. But like I said, we're going to look at alternative housing funding sources and structures. And then on the side of Oak Forest, I envision, we will end up with some kind of housing there because of, all of the characteristics of the site just kind of lend themselves to that. But I'm not certain if that will be the first thing that goes into the site or if it could be, something else that might go in instead, whether that's like a mix of office park, that kind of thing. So we're looking at all different options right now, but there's nothing, Lisa, to go back to your original question. We have not determined an end use yet for that. We're just.
And I didn't realize it was unincorporated, which makes sense.
Yeah, it is.
So,
yeah.
So there's no annexation discussion relative to Oak Forest.
Well, not yet. No, not yet. I think we want to work collaboratively with the community, come up with a use that everybody feels can be sustained. And has market presence, and then figure out if it makes sense to annex it or keep it unincorporated.
Beautiful site.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But that's
with a few historic buildings too.
We know.
This is Colin Dusing with the Will County Land Use Office. I do have a question about the idea of the local building codes being an impediment. And that is, did Oak Forest have a program where they would look at the building code renewal, shall we say, every 5 or to 8 years? Because that's what Will County does, and a lot of our municipalities do that too, is just look at the codes on a regular basis. And so the question is, did Oak Forest have such a program?
That's a good question. And I would actually be curious to hear about how the communities in your area are doing it. Oak Forest's code had been amended several times. And I think that they were interested in what they could do to streamline the code. But I think what they were also really interested in is the process internally that it takes to review the code collaboratively and between the departments, because you often have departments pulling in different directions, with community or economic development, wanting to meet housing or other economic development goals, fire being very, very understandably, concerned about public safety, etc. And what we talked about in our expert panel, was how to build that collaborative table, and what, if you needed to bring in outside experts to, assure all that public safety was being met. You know, if anything was being met, if anything was being streamlined, how to do that. One thing that worked for Lombard is that they allowed these fabricated wood products, but kept sprinklers, for example, you know, and felt like that was enough risk mitigation while also bringing down the cost of construction. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think we're curious how this is done in other communities. It was not being done that way in Oak Forest during our expert panel, but if there are, you know, other examples of doing this, you know, in Will County and elsewhere, I think we'd be interested in facilitating that to be interesting.
Well, it's not a formalized program. It's just we look at the International Building Code and all the other major codes, and they're updated every 3 years. So after an update or two, we say, okay, what's the difference? How do we want to upgrade to the new standards, or just keep what we have? And it opens up that dialogue. But it's like I said, it's not a formalized process. It's just something that we do internally, like, hey, it's about time, and then go with it.
This is David Dubois, Director of the Will County Land Use Department. The Will County is actually currently in the process of revisiting the building codes for the county. And one of the things that we do internally is we coordinate with other staff, particularly our community development administrator that deals with CDBG and other programs, to get input regarding potential impediments to see what we can do. Another thing with regard to zoning component of it is that I know that recently, and Colin, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more because you've worked on these, is we've looked at ADUs. I know the county historically has used elder housing or elder cottage housing units. Echo units is typically what they're called. It's more unincorporated areas or the larger lots. But I know that the county also has a modern housing solutions committee that has looked at some potential avenues that maybe we can address some changes within our zoning ordinance. Again, even perhaps more so with ADUs, non-conforming lots and things of that nature to help encourage different opportunities.
If I can chime in, I think we're really interested in examples of cottages and these other missing middle housing types. Not just ADUs, although ADUs are of interest to a lot of communities, but some of the other things you mentioned, we too are kind of interested in those. And if there are any in Will County, we may be interested in profiling those for some other communities.
Kyle.
Yeah, this is Adam. I just wanted to piggyback real quick. AARP is very much in support of ADU as a solution in communities where they make sense. So just to say that, but I also did have a couple of questions real briefly. The zoning issue was kind of touched on, so I don't know there's much more to say on that. But I think in addition to building codes, zoning is obviously a huge barrier to multifamily in a lot of places. So that needs to be part of what's looked at. And I wondered if on the aging in place question, if ways to incentivize either financially or just by getting good information out in some places, spreading the word about and when possible, incentivizing and financially giving people resources to make home modifications to make their homes more accessible, if that was discussed as a recommendation, because that seems like a really big fix for the aging in place question specifically.
Absolutely. We glossed over that, but that's been a key recommendation in many communities where we've done work. I think there are a lot of municipalities that have been interested in a handyman program, which is a fairly cost-effective thing that they can manage themselves or interjurisdictionally for small repairs. And there's also home modification dollars available through IDA for nonprofit providers. What we've found, and I think this might be a discussion point, is that throughout the region, the nonprofit infrastructure is very uneven. So in Lake County, for example, Community Partners for Affordable Housing is a intermediary for IDA's home modification program. and we could just bring them to a community in that county, and they can bring boxes of literature, and the recommendation can just be to inform residents of the available funds. But we've worked in other communities where there isn't a provider for these home modification dollars. And in those cases, our recommendation may be to, to find a nonprofit partner and apply. More of an observation than anything. It's important, but it's very uneven in the infrastructure that's out there for some of the communities that we serve.
It is uneven, and I think a big part of why is just there's not enough funding too, right? So I think asking, especially in this climate right now of infrastructure focus, it's important to ask for funding to come to modification programs too. So yeah, I agree though.
Mhm.
I think we've got the 1 minute warning about 20 seconds ago, and now we see it. This is I think it speaks to the topic that we have so much to discuss, and I appreciate that. Christine, did I cut? Did you have something to add? I saw.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of